moving right along with our program, brings us to our second local storyteller that we are featuring this evening, and this is Ellen Moore. She is a sixth-generation Live Oak County resident and distant relative of J. Frank Dobie. She attended Texas A&M University, earning a bachelor's degree in English and a master's degree in education. She taught high school English in Keller, Texas, following in the teaching footsteps of her mother. After 3 years in the classroom, Ellen returned to academia and attended the University of Dundee in Scotland, earning a Master's of Literature in English, culminating in a dissertation on feminism in media and literature of the American West. She has now taken her love of literature into a new career, working in publishing and seeking out the stories that are worth telling. And I'm glad to present to you Miss Ellen Moore.
Howdy. Okay, I'm just gonna jump right into it. I don't have any fun introduction stuff to say. So the story that I have selected to read tonight is called Antonette's Leap, or The Legend of Mount Bonnelle from Legends of Texas, edited by J. Frank Dobie. The legend of Mount Bonnelle is among half a dozen most widely known Texas legends. It has been printed again and again, both in prose and in verse. It is still told in many quarters, and the details of the various versions have come to a wide divergence. So far as I can learn, the oldest printed account of the legend is that given by Morphus, published in 1874. For other accounts, the reader is referred to the bibliography, which I don't have, but you can look it up. In the main, there are three versions of the legend. First, the Morphus account, in which an Indian chief steals a Spanish belle who is rescued by her lover, only to perish later with him at the cliff. Second, a version, the details of which are similar to those of various other lovers' leap legends, in which an Indian maid and an Indian brave make an interdicted elopement and are finally forced to the leap. Third, a version in which an Indian maiden is in love with a white man is forced to a precipitate death. It is an interesting fact that all these versions hitherto printed follow very closely to the Morphus story, all being revampings of it. Noteworthy variations seem to exist in oral accounts only. As Morphus's history has long been out of print, his version of the legend is here printed. The word Antonette belongs to no language. The French spelling is Antoinette. The name in Spanish is Antonia. No lady of pure Castilian blood would have borrowed a French translation for her name. Yet, Antonette is the spelling generally given in these legends. So let's hop into it. The legend as told by Morphus. The following legend of the Colorado Valley was related to me years ago by that reliable gentleman, good citizen, and gallant soldier, George L. Robertson of Austin. Mount Bonnelle was called by the early settlers of the Colorado Valley Antonette's Leap, which name was given to it in consequence of the self-immolation on that picturesque spot at an early day of a most lovely and accomplished señorita who came over from Spain at the first settlement of the missions San Jose, San Juan, Espada, and the Alamo. The fame of Antonette's beauty and intellectual charms was spread abroad through the settlements, and even extended to the hunting ground and campfires of the red men of the forest. It came to the ears and inflamed the passions of Cibolo, the chief of the Comanches, who selected a band of his favorite warriors, made a raid upon the settlements, captured the beautiful Antonette, and carried her far away to his camp in the wilderness on the headwaters of the Colorado. The parents and friends of the unfortunate señorita mourned her as lost forever, except Don Leal Navarro Rodriguez, her betrothed lover, a brave and elegantly educated young Spanish caballero of fine personal appearance and honorable, as well as brave to a fault, who determined to follow the murderous Indians to their homes and rescue his beloved Antonette or perish in the attempt. Don Leal mounted his favorite steed and, well armed, started from the Alamo alone in pursuit of the Indians, and after many a hair-breadth escapes, undiscovered, descried the camp of the savages. Selecting a dark night, he entered it, and by imitating the mockingbird, of which Antonette was very fond, and whose singing they could both imitate to perfection, he soon discovered at what spot inside the encampment she was, then came into the very tent which she occupied and found her tied securely to prevent her escape. In an instant, the lovers severed the bonds which confined the dear idol of his heart, and with her cautiously returned to where he had left his horse when he entered the Comanche camp. Then quickly mounting and taking Antonette up behind him, he started to regain the mission of the Alamo. The fury of Cibolo in the morning, when he discovered the escape of his fascinating captive, knew no bounds. He raved and blasphemed terribly. Then, sounding the alarm with 100 chosen warriors, he hastily started in pursuit, leaving the main body of his tribe to await his return. For several days, Don Leal and his beloved Antonette made good speed toward the settlements, subsisting most bountifully upon game, which was easily obtained through Don Leal's rifle, and at night sleeping under the forest trees. But on the 7th day, leaving the prairie land, they became tangled in the mountains bordering the Colorado. Early in the morning of the 8th day, the lovers discovered themselves surrounded upon all sides by the cruel savages. All attempts at further flight were hopeless. The wrathful Cibolo, with cow horns on his head and face horribly painted, advanced in all pride of power to where they had fled as a last refuge. But when he was about 50 yards off, Don Leal, who had firmly resolved to fight and die rather than surrender, raised his rifle to his shoulder, taking deliberate aim, and fired. In an instant, the savage chief bounded into the air and fell to the ground a corpse. But in another instant, at least 20 arrows pierced Don Leal's body, and he too fell to the earth and expired with a groan. After surveying the situation and revolving in her mind the miserable fate awaiting her from the merciless Comanches, the poor, unfortunate girl bent over the prostrate and lifeless form of her lover and kissed his dear lips. Then rising, with her eyes toward heaven and murmuring her last prayer to God, she plunged headlong down the precipice and struck the rocks beneath, mangled, bleeding, and dead. For a long time, the place where these rare, devoted, but most unfortunate lovers met their sad and untimely fate was called Antonette's Leap. But years ago, a wandering bohemian who happened to pass a few days in Austin blotted it out and substituted his own, and now Antonette's Leap is Mount Bonnelle.
Okay, thank you very much, Ellen. Okay, so my first question to you is, you mentioned in the beginning, or because you were reading Dobie's words, that there are multiple versions of this particular legend. Why did you choose this particular version for tonight?
I chose this particular one, because it was the longest and it would take me longer to read, but also because as he describes it, it seems to kind of be the oldest written account of the story itself, whereas all of the others have kind of been taken and made into their own just through the oral tradition of storytelling, which, I mean, it's at its base a lover's leap legend, which exists across all cultures and all over the world. Mm-hmm. So I thought it was interesting that even somewhere like Austin had its own lover's leap legend. And so I chose kind of the oldest version of the story and how Dobie kind of brought it back into print with this edition of Legends of Texas. And so yeah, it was kind of the oldest. And then from an anthropological standpoint, it really caught my attention because it's Lover's Leap. We see those legends all over the world, and it kind of just reminds me that at our core as humans, we are storytellers, and that just kind of exists in our DNA, and we want to tell stories, and the stories kind of exist across. They transcend culture and transcend county lines, state lines, world lines, even. So I thought that was interesting.
Thank you. Earlier this evening, when I was mentioning the sponsors, I mentioned that Mrs. Word and Miss Sue Dobie were sisters, but you already knew that.
Yes.
Because Mrs. Word is your grandmother.
Yes.
So as a member of the Dobie family, when and how did you become familiar with J. Frank Dobie as a writer and collector of stories and folklore? And when did you start reading his works or being interested in him and his works?
Well, I've always been aware of who he was, but I grew up not always hearing the best things about him. I mean, my great-grandmother did not exactly have a very highly held opinion of Dobie. So even when he got his, what do you call it?
Medal of Honor?
And the historical, what are those called? It's blanking. historical marker. I heard that.
Historical marker,
in front of the courthouse, and
Here
they
in George
opened
West,
the theater in his name. I was as a young kid, I always thought, okay, what's so great about this guy? Because I'd never really heard great things about him, but which feels a little sacrilegious to be saying at an event that is honoring J. Frank Dobie, but it really isn't until I kind of got older and out of college and I started teaching and I had real money to spend. I started collecting old editions of books. I'd always find myself gravitating towards the Texas literature section of bookstores, in which I'd always find editions of Dobie's works. And I think I have one on my bookshelf in my old antique books collection, which I probably should have looked at before I came here tonight so I could say exactly which one. But yeah, it really wasn't until I got older that I started to kind of recognize his influence and his impact on not only literature of Texas, but kind of the world. And in my own personal journey, I see parallels between myself and him. He taught English. I taught English, granted at the high school level. I studied English in college, and then I went to the United Kingdom to get my master's in English, just similarly to him. And so it's interesting now to kind of see how I coincidentally kind of followed in his footsteps, and working in publishing now and being so directly tied to literature and having a passion for literature of the Southwest and Western literature. It's obviously he means a lot more to me now, and I kind of understand, you can have two opinions about someone, one that's maybe not the same and one that you recognize the impact and the influence that he really does have.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Ellen Moore.
I'm here where the eagle flies. Let the world pass me by and I